All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep today. Eastern State Penitentiary. And its most infamous resident, the Shadow Man.
Oh, an excellent choice.
You really outdid yourself with these sources. This isn't just like ghost stories, We've got historical accounts, architectural analysis, even some psychology stuff.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is. It's like you want to figure out why this legend in particular gets under our skin so much.
Exactly. It goes beyond a simple spooky story. Eastern State has this, well, a brutal history, to be frank, and it intertwines with the paranormal in a way that just it makes the Shadow Man legend that much more potent.
Okay, so history lesson first then. Eastern State, 1829 it was built. And get this, its initial purpose was rehabilitation through solitary confinement.
Wow.
Yeah. It wasn't meant to be like straight up punishment. This was a radical idea, rooted in Quaker beliefs, all about introspection and penitence.
It was supposed to be humane. Revolutionary, even, for its time. I mean, imagine, instead of the typical brutal punishments, the corporal stuff that was common then, Eastern State was designed to encourage reflection, give inmates a genuine chance to repent and reform.
Right. But there's always a but, isn't there?
Right.
It didn't quite work out as planned,
Not quite, no.
Overcrowding,
Yeah.
budget cuts, conditions deteriorated. And those punishments you mentioned, like the mad chair, the water bath,
Yes.
they became all too real. And Eastern State became a symbol of cruelty, a place where hope went to die.
Exactly. The mad chair. Inmates strapped so tightly their circulation was cut off. Or the water bath. Submerged in ice-cold water, then left outside to freeze. Imagine. It's hard to even fathom that level of suffering within those walls.
And that leads us to, the Shadow Man, who
Yeah.
isn't exactly Casper the Friendly Ghost, would you say?
Not quite, no.
He's described as this tall, solid shadow.
Right.
Not, like wispy or translucent like most ghost sightings. It's like the darkness itself has taken a solid form.
Yes, and it's that solidity. That combined with his unpredictable appearances and disappearances. It's unnerving. It's not a jump scare, It's this sustained, unsettling presence. It plays on, I think, our deepest fears of the unknown. Imagine. You turn a corner in those dimly lit corridors and you see this solid shadow looming.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it. And it's not even just about seeing him, is it?
No.
A lot of what you sent mentioned people experiencing intense unease, that feeling of being watched or followed. It's as if the prison itself is part of the haunting, adding to the fear and isolation that was, built into its design.
Absolutely. It's that feeling of being targeted, of
Yeah.
something unseen focusing its attention on you. That's what takes the Shadow Man from a spooky sight to a truly terrifying experience.
Okay, so origins of the legend. This is where it gets really interesting, because nobody really knows for sure where it came from.
Right. The lack of a definitive origin story just adds to the mystery. It allows for multiple interpretations. And, you've provided two main theories for us to consider.
Okay, hit me with them.
All right. One theory suggests the Shadow Man he's the spirit of a former inmate, embodying all the suffering endured within those walls. Imagine the collective anguish, the despair of so many individuals trapped in that brutal system. It's not a stretch to imagine that their pain might linger and take on, a form of its own.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. But the other theory, that's the one that really gets me thinking. That suggests the Shadow Man isn't a ghost in the traditional sense, but more like a manifestation of the negative energy itself. Decades of cruelty and despair, leaving a kind of psychic imprint on the location.
Yes, it's like a stain that can't be washed away. If you think about the intense emotions, the agony experienced by those subjected to punishments, like the mad chair, it's almost as if the very air itself is thick with that suffering, and the Shadow Man is a physical manifestation of that energy.
Okay, so we've got the setting, chilling to say the least.
Yeah.
We've got this unsettling figure and these theories about where he came from. But what about, the actual encounters, the experiences people have reported? What makes them more than just like, oh, I saw a shadowy figure?
Well, the sources you've included, they move beyond simple sightings. They delve into the sensations people feel, the intense unease, the feeling of being watched, followed. It's like our most primal fears are amplified within that oppressive atmosphere.
Like the prison itself is part of the haunting almost.
Exactly. Like its design meant to isolate and instill fear, it somehow feeds into the whole Shadow Man phenomenon.
Yeah, it's like the building itself is a participant. Okay, so we got the history, the eerie atmosphere, the legend. But are there any specific encounters, stories that stand out? that make the Shadow Man more than just this vague, spooky concept?
It's one thing to, talk about theories and the general spookiness, but it's the specific encounters, those personal stories that really bring it to life. Or unlife, I guess you could say.
Right. It's those firsthand accounts that give you a glimpse into what people actually experience in there.
Exactly.
And some of these stories are, well, unsettling, to say the least, like the one about the former guard. He saw a shadow, but it was following him, not just standing there.
Yeah, and what's so chilling about that account is the suggestion of intent. The Shadow Man wasn't just present. He seemed to be actively engaging, pursuing, and then just like that, vanishes when the guard turns a corner. Like a game of hide and seek in those darkened corridors.
Okay, that is creepy, like nightmare material.
Right.
And then there's that incident with the mirror, right? The woman who sees the Shadow Man behind her in the reflection, but when she turns around, poof, gone.
That one taps into that primal fear of mirrors, like portals. As if the Shadow Man could, I don't know, cross over from another dimension.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he was playing with her perception, choosing to reveal himself in the most frightening way.
Deliberately, perhaps.
And it's not just personal experiences. You included this stuff about the paranormal investigations at Eastern State, shadowy figures caught on camera, and EVP recordings. Some people think it's the Shadow Man's voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, pretty wild, right?
It is.
So the evidence is, well, debatable, let's say, but it definitely adds another layer to this whole thing. But even if we put aside, the ghost stories for a second, we got to consider the psychology of fear, especially in a place like Eastern State, where the very architecture seems meant to unsettle you.
You're right. The isolation, the darkness, the sheer weight of suffering, all contained within those walls. It's bound to evoke fear and anxiety, even in people who aren't, inclined to believe in the paranormal.
So is it possible, then, that some of these encounters, these feelings, the glimpses of shadows, are they just our minds playing tricks on us, our imaginations going wild because we're in this environment that's basically like primed for fear?
It's possible, yeah. You sent over some information about pareidolia. That's that tendency to see meaningful patterns in random or vague stuff, right? Like faces in clouds, or seeing animals in rock formations. It's how our brains try to make sense of the world, but sometimes it leads us down a spooky path.
Right, like flickering shadows in an old abandoned prison. Our brains jump to conclusions, especially if we're already expecting something scary.
Exactly. And then you factor in that Eastern State was designed to be, well, disorienting and isolating. No wonder people feel uneasy or think they see things that might not actually be there.
But then how do you explain, those consistent reports? Similar descriptions. Specific locations where he's seen most often, it seems like there's a pattern there, more than just imagination.
That's the real question, isn't it? Where does psychology end and where does the paranormal begin? Is it possible that the prison's history, all that suffering, has somehow imprinted itself on the location and created an atmosphere where paranormal activity is just more likely?
So it's not just about whether ghosts are real. It's about the possibility that places can hold on to energy, emotions, in ways that we don't fully understand. And that brings us back to those two main theories, right? The Shadow Man as either a residual haunting, just an echo of all that suffering, or, an intelligent entity, something aware of us, maybe even interacting with us.
And both theories are pretty compelling. They offer these different ways of understanding how the past influences the present. The residual haunting idea that suggests that strong emotions, trauma, suffering, they can leave an impression, a lasting one, like a psychic residue that just lingers long after the event is over.
Like it's not a conscious entity or a ghost in the, in the typical sense, more like a recording of energy playing on a loop,
Yeah.
fueled by those emotions experienced there. It's like the very stones absorb the anguish, the despair, and are echoing it back out.
Precisely. But then you have the intelligent entity theory, which raises even more questions. About consciousness. What happens after death? What if the Shadow Man isn't an echo, but an aware being? Trapped, maybe? Or choosing to stay within the prison?
Okay, now we're getting into some serious mind-bending stuff. What if he's watching us? Maybe trying to, I don't know, communicate in ways we don't understand. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And terrifying.
It is. It is. It really challenges our assumptions, doesn't it? About life, death, the nature of reality.
So where does that leave us? We've explored the history, the legend, the stories people tell, the psychological stuff, the paranormal explanations. Are we any closer to to figuring out the truth about the Shadow Man.
Maybe the truth isn't a destination, but a journey, you know? It's about asking questions, exploring, being open to the possibility that we might not ever have all the answers.
You know, I kind of like that. It's not about finding a definitive answer, but about embracing the mystery.
And in a way, the Shadow Man embodies that idea. He's this blank slate onto which we project our fears, our beliefs, our longing to understand what's beyond our everyday perception.
Okay, wow, deep thoughts. But before we get too existential here, let's bring it back to Eastern State. How has this legend, this shadow, impacted the prison's legacy, its place in popular culture?
That's a good question. The Shadow Man has definitely become synonymous with Eastern State's reputation as a haunted place. People come from all over, eager to experience the eerie atmosphere and maybe, just maybe, catch a glimpse of the elusive Shadow Man themselves.
It's like he's their unofficial mascot.
And he's put them on the map in a way. Brought Eastern State back to life, or unlife, I guess. I don't know. There's something kind of fascinating about that, isn't there?
It really is. He's undeniably, well, put Eastern State on the map for, I'd say, a whole new generation. Right. It's drawing people in, making them want to learn about the history,
Wow.
the architecture, the lives that were, lived and lost there. It's like history coming alive in a spooky kind of way, thanks to this legend.
You've hit on something there. Eastern State operates as a museum now, right? They offer historical tours and haunted tours, catering to different interests. But you can't deny it. The paranormal stuff and the Shadow Man is like their poster child. It's a huge draw.
Oh, totally. And even if you're not like a full-on ghost believer, his story adds this layer of intrigue. You question what you see and feel walking around there. It's like he's turned the whole prison into like an interactive exhibit, blurring the lines between reality and imagination.
It's a perfect setting for that kind of exploration, wouldn't you say? I mean, it was a place meant to make people confront their inner darkness, their capacity for good and evil. And the Shadow Man, whether he's real or not, he kind of continues that tradition, doesn't he? He makes you question, investigate, confront your own beliefs about what's possible.
I never thought of it that way, but yeah. He's like an unexpected tour guide,
Yeah.
leading us through the shadows of history in our minds.
Precisely. And maybe that's the most valuable takeaway from all this. The Shadow Man, ghost, legend, whatever he is, he's become this catalyst for deeper understanding. He forces us to confront not just, the dark parts of history, but the mysteries of the unknown, the things we can't quite grasp.
Wow, that's pretty profound. So we're wrapping up this deep dive into Eastern State and its resident shadow. What's the one thing you really want our listener to take away from all this?
I think it's the idea that sometimes the most fascinating discoveries, they're found in the shadows. It's about embracing the mystery, the unknown, being willing to question, explore, to go beyond the surface. The Shadow Man, he serves as a reminder that there's always more to discover, more to learn about ourselves and the universe we live in.
That's beautifully said. And that's what makes a deep dive so great. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey, the exploration, the thrill of the unknown. So keep those minds open. Stay curious. And remember, sometimes the most intriguing answers are the ones that lead to more questions. Thanks for joining us on this chilling adventure, Eastern State Penitentiary and the Shadow Man. We'll see you next time.